When we landed in Kandahar, it was quite the eye-opener. As soon as you land, there's fighter aircraft taking off, there's helicopters going. So you realize, my God, this is something much bigger. So the enormity of the mission really kind of hit home and what Canada was actually involved with.
We are now entering Kandahar City. Check it out.
We were driving through Kandahar City, and all I can think of is, you know, I grew up with Star Wars. So Star Wars and Jabba the Hutt, and here we are. I'm in Star Wars. In the back of our minds was suicide bombers in cars. There was now a resurgent Taliban, at least in the shadows.
A lot of those villages and tribes in those areas had already become so disenfranchised with their own local government that they had already turned to the Taliban. The corruption fueled the insurgency. We arrived at a time that the recruitment was well underway.
First time we came under contact, it wasn't from a suicide bomber at all. We were driving back, and I was in my boss's vehicle, and someone fires an RPG at us. The RPG goes through one of our soft-skinned G-Wagon vehicles and goes straight underneath the back seats. The guys that were sitting in the back seat have the RPG go underneath them, go straight through. Their pants are on fire, but not badly. So they've just, you know, clearly had a close call. That's when you realize we're an army of strangers in a land of strangers.
8-6-9.
I was a little concerned about the provincial reconstruction team going into Kandahar. One of the first things that the Taliban did in Kandahar was start killing off Red Cross workers. And that happened very early on. That happened in 2003, 2004. So the idea behind the PRT was that it would provide a little bit of protection. We knew that Kandahar was, I wouldn't call it Wild West, but maybe Wild South. And the concern was that the PRT would simply be a goat on a rope.
Officers would work with a platoon of soldiers and accompany them in their fighting vehicles to engage in discussions with village leaders throughout a whole district, one village at a time. And in those discussions, ascertain village requirements and whether or not the governance structure of the district and the province was caring about the problems of the village and doing something about it.
My job was to liaise with village elders and find out what they needed for food, water, shelter, and education. Those were my bugaboos, education. I would ask the elders if their girls could be educated. When they stopped laughing, they said, if I built them in a separate school, they could.
Why were they laughing?
Because the concept of educating girls was like educating dogs to them.
Captain Green was with Captain Shamoon in a platoon from A Company, engaged in a shura with local leaders or elders in Shinke village.
We walked in, we lay our weapons down and our helmets. It started out well. It was our third of the day. And the previous two had gone well. We were feeling good about it. And for this shura, Rob Dolson had asked to come. He was on my left.
Why do you take your helmets off?
A sign of respect.
When you're engaged in shura, you can take your helmet off, you can take your personal protective equipment off, because Pashtunwali culture demands that the host in that village guarantees your protection while you're engaged in that kind of activity. In the middle of this shura, an Afghan youth branding an axe came up behind Captain Green.
Walked up behind me, took an axe from under his robe, and sank it in my head like he was chopping a log. The axe penetrated 3 inches into my skull. My brains are leaking out. When the man on my left, Rob Dolson, managed to grab his weapon and shoot 2 rounds into the kid before he could strike again, he saved my life. Rob Dolson, my hero. And it was a signal for a Taliban ambush from across the river. And all hell broke out.
There was a firefight immediately afterwards. There were some Taliban hidden in the village. So in fact, Sinn K had been harboring a Taliban cell while they were in discussion with us. Whether or not the youth was coerced by the Talibs, we don't know.
Pushtun Wali, the code of hospitality, had been extended to them. This is now an issue between the Afghans and the Taliban, and how the Taliban don't respect their own culture. Because this was not a breach of protocol between the Afghans and us. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got everything to do with the Afghans and how the Taliban don't respect their own culture.
After he had been wounded, a lot of agencies reassessed whether or not they were going to continue with developmental efforts. So it was a natural thing for us to move into more lethal combat operations by April of 2006.
The Taliban brought a guy named Mullah Dadullah Lang back into the fold. And Dadullah Lang was a Taliban commander who'd actually been fired by Mullah Omar for being too brutal. Dadullah Lang came back to Omar and said, listen, we've discovered a scheme here. Okay, the Americans are going to pull out of Kandahar. They're going to hand it over to the Canadians. There's a potential weakness here because the Canadians won't fight. So he convinced Mullah Omar that 2006 was the year that he could take back Kandahar City.
I had information that they had built a defensible base, a very large one in that area with compounds, defensive positions, and their sole job was to use that as a staging area to be able to launch attacks into Kandahar City. That was the purpose of it.
They planned to actually go from those bases to do a spectacular attack in Kandahar City that would get world press and demoralize NATO and make us lack credibility.
There were at least 1,500 fighters in that area, and they were ready to launch an attack into Kandahar City. I had enough information to say the force that Colonel Hope was launching was a lot smaller for the fight that we were going into. I didn't want the operation to go through, but the decision was made to launch on it.
So when Colonel Hope rolled the 1st Battalion Task Force Orion into Pashmul on the 3rd of August, they basically hit a hornet's nest.
We mustered a company from 2 PPCLI with a task to clear the area of Highway 1.
I told Ian Hope, Ian, I need you to take the town. Where is it? I said, you just go south, and when they start shooting at you, you've reached it.
Highway 1 is the main artery that ran from the west of Kandahar City toward Helmand. Very, very important road.
We would move towards what was referred to as a white school.
Was it a school?
From what I understand, the school did exist at one point. The Taliban went in, beheaded some of the teachers. A school in name only.
The fact that we call it to this day a white school perplexes me. It was a Taliban fort. It had been built as a white school. You know, it was a big brick building that was very sturdy, and so they took it over and turned it into a fortress. On the morning of August the 3rd, the battle group launched, and really they knew that the center of Taliban resistance was going to be the white school, the Taliban fortress.
And I remember Colonel Hope saying, we're going to an extremely volatile part of the country, and we are going to see combat. And hand in hand with that, you know, he was very matter-of-fact about the fact that not everyone was going to come home.
I led the southern group out at about 3 in the morning. At about 4:15, we found a group of Taliban fighters in what could only be an early warning position.
We're going to send A and EP forward to cover us as we move our way through to the blocking position.
The lead Lav 3 got on the radio and called in a contact and said, you know, I see 6 guys with rocket-propelled grenades and machine guns, and I'm asking permission to fire.
And I said yes.
So it's going to be over in that direction.
So we basically fired upon that group with concentrated LAV fire of 4 different vehicles using 25mm machine guns. There's not much left of that group once that kind of munition hits them. And then we were moving forward to actually get onto that position and find out what it was when one of our vehicles hit an IED.
There was a loud boom, and it struck the lead lav, which was driven by Corporal Chris Reed, and he was killed.
The number of IEDs on the road prevented us from wanting to risk any more lavs moving forward.
Colonel Hope is like, okay, we really need to get there, but I'm not willing to drive down this road anymore. So we're gonna do this assault on foot.
So Sergeant Ingram and I got together, and we basically figured what the best approach was up to the school. The lavs that were already in position, it wasn't wise to move them forward. We didn't know how many IEDs were in the road.
They had about 20, 25 Afghan National Police attached to John Hamilton's platoon. And as they moved forward, they sustained heavy fire from all around the White School. The Afghan National Police immediately fled the battlefield.
I called back to Colonel Hope. I said, sir, the Afghan National Police ran away. They're hiding now in a ditch. And he goes, John, you have to show them how it's done. And I said, no problem, sir.
He courageously moved his forward troops into the school area, into the couple of outbuildings near the school, and said he was set there, which meant I would have to find more forces to come forward to begin the clearance. As I was beginning to plan that, it became obvious to us that he was actually in a kill zone, that the enemy had wanted this to happen.
And that's when the firing really started to pick up. Several RPGs, heavy small arms fire going over our heads. It's about maybe 11 o'clock, getting close to noon. Sun is at its peak, and it's 45, 50 degrees Celsius. It's extremely hot. I have guys going down to heat stroke.
You have to compartmentalize as a commander on a battlefield. You know these soldiers, you love these soldiers, and there's no other word appropriate for that. You love them. If they trust you, you feel that back. Committing them to what is almost certain injury and death is very, very difficult. At this point in the operation, though, I got over that.
So I had stayed back with those guys to provide a foot on the ground for John and the rest of the assault forces movement up to the school, and they were doing it in bounds.
By the time I got up to the school, to the objective area,
Back up.
I had 14 men. The vast majority of them were combat ineffective due to heat stroke, and also Private Kevin Dallaire was wounded at that time. Our situation was very precarious. They needed reinforcements up here as quick as possible. The fire was pretty intense. It was coming from all over the place. There's 14 Canadians against what turned out to be 150 to 200 Taliban. So I'd asked for indirect fire support from artillery. And it was denied.
Why?
By higher headquarters because of potential collateral damage, because this was called a school.
NATO's command and control philosophy out of Kabul was tight control of all combat forces. So, orders came down about tight regulations with the use of fire, indirect fire, direct fire, aircraft. So when we say school, there has to be a board convened, a targeting board with lawyers and experts in different types of fire and munitions, and somebody who knows about that actual facility, and they decide whether or not we can fire at that building.
That was why we had no fast air and we had no artillery. And on a conventional battlefield where we have all these enablers that are supposed to be at our disposal, to be denied them in a situation like that was, it was absolutely heartbreaking.
What was your feeling about that?
Yeah, I can repeat the words I used, but I was pretty upset.
One thing that will forever stick out in my mind is the radio chatter when those guys came under contact in the south. You could tell they were fighting literally for their lives. And to hear some of the voices on that radio, I'll never forget.
John Hamilton is yelling, "You have to come help us, you have to come help us, we've got casualties." So I looked at the two guys that were with me, Bryce and Mark, and I said, "Okay guys, we have to go link up with those guys." Now at this point, the volume of fire is picking up, and so there's machine gun fire and small arms fire. There's rockets coming down the road. So we got up and we started running across this field, and it was absolutely insane. It was one of those things that I think when you watch a movie and you see bullets splashing around people's feet and rocks skimming by your head and stuff like that, that's exactly what it was like. And at the time, I wasn't really thinking a whole lot about it, but I remember thinking like, geez, I really hope we make it.
We were still under intense fire. Guys were fighting hard. All of a sudden, things just went black, and I felt this explosion hit.
Boom, this giant explosion, and I'm being propelled backwards across this room, and I hit the wall.
After the round hit and I opened my eyes, Von Ingram was right across from me. Von was actually, as he was dying, was providing first aid to others that were wounded as well. It just speaks to the type of man that he was.
It really became obvious that there's a lot of bad guys out there that really want us dead. Now there's 3 dead. Kevin Dallaire is seriously wounded, like gravely injured. 6 others that are pretty beat up. So there's like 4 of us that are not injured, that are still able to fight.
Went and grabbed the radio and got one transmission back, was get those f***ing lavs up here, we're gonna die. And then the radio went dead.
I put out a all arms call for fire. Basically, it's a plea from a ground commander saying, we're in trouble. If there's any aircraft out there that can help. I wasn't authorized to drop a bomb, but I was authorized for a show of force. So what the U.S. Air Force did was send a B-1 bomber at 500 feet. Now, if you've ever been under a B-1 bomber flying at 500 feet, it's probably the equivalent of an earthquake. The entire ground shakes. It was only the Air Force coming at that critical moment that saved us and turned the tide.
Lavs were firing like crazy as they were driving up. And by the time they got to the school, so that by the time they crossed that 150 meters, all their guns were dry. They fired every single bullet.
Remember yelling over to Willie McDonald. I said, Willie, get the f over here and help me out because I'm hurting. So eventually they came up, loaded us in the lavs. And I remember looking over at a truck full of A&P, the Afghan National Police. They were all kind of sitting in the bed of the truck there, and they were laughing. That enraged me to the point that if I had my rifle in reach, it probably would have ended extremely ugly for them. And at that point, I had no doubt in my mind they had something to do with it.
The hardest decision I ever made was at the end of August 3rd, walking away from that fight. I don't regret the decision.
Is it tough to talk about?
I've talked about it 1,000 times, and, from a personal therapy perspective there, it's what's helped me the most deal with that, is talking about it and letting people know the type of heroes that fought that day. Guys like Sergeant Von Ingram, Corporal Bryce Keller, Private Kevin Dallaire, Corporal Chris Reed, guys like that. I have to talk about it because I'd be doing them an injustice if I didn't.
I was just as upset as everybody else because in knowing something that might happen, then it comes true, it weighs on you, and it weighed on me for many years. Even though we took significant casualties at the White School, and it was a tough day for everybody, that allowed us to confirm the information that led to Operation Medusa, so that eventually led to the saving of Kandahar City.